Even if you're not one of the more than 50% of Americans who believe in ghosts, there's no denying that there are some locations that, because of their design, their history, or the overall environment, send shivers down your spine. From underground caverns to creepy woodlands, prepare yourself. Here are the top 15 most paranormal places on Earth. Number 15. The Catacombs, Paris, France. Paris is one of the most visited cities on Earth, famed for its rich mix of historical sites such as the Eiffel Tower, the Notre Dame Cathedral, and the wealthy cultural venues. But beneath the streets of the capital of France lies one of the creepiest and ghost-laden tunnel complexes you'll find anywhere in the world. The tunnels were originally built in the late 18th century to consolidate the numerous stone quarries and mines in the region and to stabilize the ground. But they were soon used as a storage facility that allowed the city planners to remove ancient burial grounds and relocate the human remains there. To begin with, the bones were simply piled high, but from 1810 work began to arrange them in ornamental designs, and part of the tunnel network is now one of the largest subterranean ossuaries on Earth. Amazingly, the catacombs contain the remains of as many as 6 million people, with vast walls of stacked skulls and femurs, as well as a room dedicated to deformations and various tablets that bear inscriptions of warnings to those who dare to walk along the twisting passages. It's no surprise, then, that countless visitors have reported paranormal experiences in the catacombs, from seeing ghosts and strange lights to unexplained chills, objects moving, and the sounds of screams emanating in the distance. Any trip there is sure to leave you with an uneasy feeling, and if you want to see an apparition for yourself, this is one of the best places you can go to do so. Number 14. Bangalore Fort, Rajasthan, India. Located in the Rajasthan state of India, Bangalore Fort, which is around 146 miles from Delhi, was built in 1573 by the region's ruler at the time, Bhagwat Das, for his youngest son to live in luxury, but also as an outpost from where the family could keep control of their land and fend off invaders. It covers a huge area, and while many parts now lay in ruins, you can see the sites of numerous former temples, the marketplace, and various different palaces, as well as the smaller structures where everyday members of society would have lived. During its heyday, the residents of the fort lived during often cruel and tough times. However, this led to a number of myths about the area, and it's the reason why it's so closely associated with paranormal events. According to local legends, the fort was built on the land of a religious leader who said no structure should be taller than his own, and if any shadows from another's house were cast over his, then he'd cause the unending destruction of those who were responsible for it. Further to this, there's also a tale of a black magic wizard who was crushed to death in the fort's marketplace after failing to play a trick on a princess, and it's his soul that's said to still roam the streets. Countless guests have reported seeing him, complete with his dark robes and awkward walk. There's also a real fear he's still able to use his nefarious incantations from beyond the grave and curse anyone who lays eyes upon him. Number 13. Hoia Baciu Forest, Romania. Covering an area of around 730 acres in northwestern Romania, in the Cluj County of Transylvania, the eerie Hoia Baciu Forest has long been associated with unexplained phenomena. Often referred to as the Romanian Bermuda Triangle, the warped trees, rapidly developing fog and mist, and the strange aromas in the air certainly set the scene. But this is also a place with a dark history, and the souls of those who have been wronged are still said to be searching for peace. Centuries ago, peasants are believed to have been killed there in their thousands in order to reduce the number of mouths that needed to be fed by rapidly dwindling food supplies. This is what's believed to have first caused the forest to be haunted. In later years, it's a story of a girl who walked into the woods and vanished, only to reappear 5 years later, having not aged a day, and with no recollection of what she had been doing during the intervening time, and of a shepherd with a flock of sheep who also disappeared without a trace. Then there's the mysterious clearing within the forest, which is an almost perfect oval shape, and according to locals, where nothing has grown for centuries, and is a popular place for believers to go to try to open portals with other dimensions. And the fact the forest is also the hotspot in the country for reports of UFO sightings. Even visitors who don't see any of these strange events for themselves report peculiar sensations and feelings that stay with them long after they've left, making this one of the creepiest natural spaces you could ever visit. Number 12. Castle of Good Hope, South Africa. The Castle of Good Hope is a fortified position that was built on the coastline of Cape Town by the Dutch East India Company in the late 17th century to help protect their interests in the region. It remains the oldest building in South Africa, but since there was a land reclamation project in the bay it once overlooked, it's now much further inland. Because of its long story, the castle is linked with a number of legends from the area, and it's considered to be one of the most paranormal places in the whole of Africa. It used to be a good vantage point, for example, to witness on stormy nights the legendary spectral ship called the Flying Dutchman. That's the ghoulish remains of a vessel that misjudged the rocky cape just a few years before the castle was built. There are many stories of terrible acts that took place inside the castle, such as a huge number of executions of locals or soldiers who were accused of acting against the empire. And criminals were also routinely punished and tortured there as well. It's their souls that are still said to haunt the grounds, with modern guards often refusing to stay at their posts because the screams, faint voices, and mysterious footsteps have become too much for them to handle. In fact, guards there will often choose to walk the entire perimeter of the castle instead of passing through certain archways late at night, all because of how frightening it can be. Number 11. Myrtle's Plantation, St. Francisville, United States. Often mentioned as one of America's most haunted homes, Myrtle's Plantation in St. Francisville, Louisiana was the site of at least one, but as many as 10 gruesome murders. The main house was built in 1796 as a classic Creole-style cottage and, positioned on a hill, gave its owners a vantage point across the plantation to keep an eye on its operations. One of the main legends associated with this place is that it was constructed on top of a former Indian burial ground and that it was cursed right from the start, with a ghost of a young Native American girl having been reported on countless occasions over the past 200 years. In total, the plantation is, however, said to be haunted by 12 ghosts, the most famous and prevalent of which is called Chloe. She was a slave who was pressured into having an affair by the owner at the time, and subsequently accidentally poisoned his wife and children, an act that resulted in her being hanged by the other slaves for fear of retaliation against them. There's also the ghost of the only confirmed murder victim in the house, who was shot on the front porch, but he didn't die instantly, and was able to crawl inside and up the staircase to the 17th step. His specter has now been seen walking up and down this staircase, often stopping on the 17th step momentarily before continuing his patrol. Number 10. Arradale Hospital, Australia. Originally opened in 1865, the Ararat Lunatic Asylum, which was later renamed the Arradale Hospital, was built to the southwest of Victoria in Australia to accommodate the increasing number of people that were deemed unfit to be able to live in a wider society. Designed in a similar way to other Victorian asylums in the UK and Australia, it wasn't so much focused on the rehabilitation or assistance of patients as opposed to the containment of them. And in the beginning at least, their treatment was atrocious. Restraining jackets and electroconvulsive therapy were commonplace, as were transorbital lobotomies, and these procedures were even performed on young children. Add to this the labyrinthine twists and turns of the corridors that connect the various buildings, and the countless reports of suicides and mysterious deaths that took place here over the years, and it's no wonder that this is considered one of the most haunted buildings in the country. Investigations have resulted in video footage that supposedly shows a ghost face in one of the cells, strange electrical signals, orbs, and nonsensical shadows, and visitors often report feeling the sensation of being surrounded by lots of people, even though they're in there alone. It's so intense that there's some paranormal investigators that refuse to return because they've experienced such horrific things. Now that the hospital's been closed, authorities have begun turning it into something completely different, having now planted a large vineyard and olive grove to try, and they're hoping that, at least now, something good can come from the place. Number 9. La Recoleta Cemetery, Buenos Aires, Argentina. Cemeteries can be creepy places at the best of times, but there's one that's in the Recoleta neighborhood of Buenos Aires in Argentina that's not only often described as being one of the most beautiful in the world, but one of the most haunted. It was the final resting place of famous people like Evita, several Argentinian presidents, Nobel Prize winners, actors, and composers. And there's something about the ornate structures that are lit up in the bright midday sun that makes it immediately feel like no other cemetery. There are a number of paranormal stories associated with this place, but perhaps the most famous is the tale of Rufina Cambaceres. Her family had discovered her lifeless body in 1902 on the day after her 19th birthday, and her devastated parents laid her to rest at La Recoleta a few days later. The true tragedy, though, was that she wasn't dead, and she woke up soon after this. For the next few days, she scratched and scraped at the coffin she was stuck inside, and the groundskeeper only realized too late that the coffin had actually moved. By the time it was opened, she was dead for real, and her spirit is said to still haunt the cemetery to this day. Number 8. Hellfire Club, Montpelier Hill, Ireland. In Dublin, Ireland, there's a 1,257-foot-tall hill that's been long a focal point of the surrounding area. Originally, the peak of the hill was used as an ancient burial site with a number of graves dating back to the Neolithic age. But around 1725, the stones from these were removed and used in the construction of a hunting lodge. Over the following decades, this building became the headquarters of the Hellfire Club, a group that became renowned for their debaucherous parties, beliefs in the occult, and attempts at demonic summonings. And these activities have left a long-lasting mark on the area. The building eventually burned down, and despite attempts to rebuild it, fell into a state of disrepair. And this revealed several sets of bones, most of which were of animals, but some that were suspected to have been people who were sacrificed during the rituals that were performed there. To this day, it's said that the ghost of a giant black cat roams the land to warn people to stay away, but those who ignore it may encounter some of the 4 other specters that are said to inhabit the remains of the club, and were likely those who fell victim to what happened there. There are now plans, though, to redevelop the entire site as a visitor center and a restaurant, but because of superstitions surrounding the place, progress with these ideas have been slow. Number 7. Poveglia Island, Venetian Lagoon, Italy. The Venetian Lagoon has been inhabited for more than 1,000 years, with the main focus being on Venice itself, but there are a number of other islands in the area that have also traditionally been used for supporting workers and providing facilities where there wasn't enough space in the city. The first record of Poveglia Island dates back to 421, when residents of the surrounding area fled barbarian attacks and lived there for a short while. But it was only in the late 18th century that permanent buildings were constructed there. At first, it was used as a customs checkpoint for goods destined for Venice, but in the 1790s, after several sailors arrived with the plague, the island was turned into a quarantine station. It was used like this until 1814, and then a century later, the buildings were converted for use as a mental asylum, which remained open for half a century. The awful conditions that people were kept in during both these uses, though, are what have led to the belief that spirits haunt it to this day. Among experiments such as lobotomies that were performed on patients and stories of doctors killing themselves after being tormented by ghosts, Poveglia Island is still officially off-limits for anyone without express permission to visit, something that only further serves to increase the mystery surrounding the place. Number 6. Dragsholm Slot, Denmark. Located on the island of Zealand in Denmark, Dragsholm Slot is a castle that was first built by the Bishop of Roskilde in 1215. At this time, it was a palace, but in the following centuries, modifications were made to turn it into a fortified structure, to such an extent that it was the only building to survive the invasion of Count Christopher in the Middle Ages. During the 16th and 17th centuries, the castle was used as a prison, mainly for members of the nobility who had insulted the king and its former prisoners, who were kept in atrocious conditions but are believed to continue to haunt the building. Of the many ghosts that have been documented, the most famous are the lingering bishop, who is believed to be the apparition of the Bishop of Roskilde, who was held and executed there when the castle was overtaken by a Danish king. The unearthly Earl of Boswell, who was the 3rd husband of Mary, Queen of Scots, and died in the castle as a prisoner when he was just 44. And both the White and Grey Ladies of Dragsholm, both of which are believed to be the ghosts of women who died there in horrific circumstances, and whose skeletal remains have since been uncovered on the grounds. Number 5. Château du Brézec, France. Château du Brézec, which is in Maine-et-Loire, France, was first built almost 1,000 years ago in the 11th century by the Counts of Anjou. It would have looked very different then, though, because it was completely renovated in the 15th century to be more like a fort and became linked with the French monarchy, either as a residence for the royal family itself or as a gift as a reward for performing great acts in the name of the French Empire. Today it's run as a hotel, but while you'd normally expect to be rubbing shoulders with other guests looking to experience the rustic French lifestyle for themselves, there's one resident who's more permanent. Known as La Dame Verte, or the Green Lady, she's believed to be the ghost of Charlotte de Brézé, who is thought to have been the illegitimate daughter of King Charles VII. She was forced into a marriage with a nobleman for the benefit of the king, and while the two did not love each other, her husband flew into a fit of rage when he discovered she was having an affair. He murdered her and her fling, and according to legend, buried them somewhere on the estate, and it's said that her ghost will only finally be able to rest once her remains have been discovered. Number 4. Banff Springs Hotel, Alberta, Canada. If you ever visit Banff in Alberta, Canada, it's almost impossible to miss the stunning structure that is the Banff Springs Hotel that overlooks a valley within the Rocky Mountains. It was built in 1888 and has since been the premier destination for those who can afford it to stay. But while you'll see endless promotional materials talking of the leisure activities on offer, the hotel's management doesn't tend to mention the tales of paranormal activity that have been reported within. There have, in its more than 130 years of operation, been several residents who have checked in but never left, and they seem to take pleasure in toying with current guests. There are stories of pillows being pulled from beneath them while they sleep, flickering lights and bloody handprints on the mirrors, as well as 2 distinct ghosts that roam the corridors. There's the bride who was said to have slipped, fallen, and died on one of the elaborate staircases on her wedding day in the 1920s and still walks around in her wedding dress. And also the bellman, who's actually the helpful spirit of a former worker at the hotel who died there in 1975. Number 3. Monte Cristo Homestead, New South Wales, Australia. The ornate-looking Monte Cristo homestead was built by pioneer Christopher Crawley in 1885 on a hill that overlooks the town of Junee in New South Wales, Australia. His family lived there for around 60 years, but after a number of deaths of both staff and relatives, it's now one of the most haunted places on the planet. A maid died after falling off a balcony, a stable boy was burned in his sleep after his mattress was set ablaze, and even an infant of the family died after being dropped down the stairs. There were probably many more incidents too, but these are the ones that have been remembered, and their ghosts are still likely to torment anyone who sets foot inside. It's the subsequent owners who have borne the brunt of this, with the reports of flickering lights despite there being no electricity, the constant sound of footsteps, ghostly apparition, and murmuring voices, and the people who currently own the property are seriously considering demolishing it once and for all in order to escape the problems. Number 2. Ancient Ram Inn, Gloucestershire, England. The ancient Ram Inn first opened its doors to customers in the year 1145 and was used to house masons and builders involved in the construction of the neighboring church over the following years. Amazingly, it's virtually remained open ever since and is now a bed and breakfast, but a combination of being built on a pagan burial ground and a number of murders that have taken place there, this is easily the most haunted place in the UK. Said to be visited by as many as 20 different distinct ghosts, guests often hear children screaming, have received electric shocks from wooden beams, have been pushed down the stairs by invisible forces, and have even reported seeing furniture flying around the rooms and being pushed down onto the bed by a sex demon. It's not uncommon for people to flee in the middle of the night because of their experiences, and the owner herself used to choose to sleep in a caravan outside instead of actually within the walls of the pub. It's now mainly just paranormal investigators and those looking for a spooky inspiration that stay there, since it's simply too frightening for normal members of the public to even attempt getting a good night's sleep. Number 1. Eastern State Penitentiary, Philadelphia, United States. The Eastern State Penitentiary in Philadelphia first opened in 1829 and was the first prison in the U.S. that was built to a new design philosophy of how to handle inmates. It was the largest and most expensive public structure that had ever been constructed in the country, and even as you approach and see the tall stone walls and crumbling corridors, you can tell there's something strange about the place. It remained open for 142 years, during which time it held thousands of murderers and other high-security prisoners, but the way they were treated was, at times, just as horrific as the crimes they had committed. There was a water bath which inmates were dunked in and held outside until ice formed on their skin. the mad chair where they were restrained so tightly that their circulation was cut off and sometimes resulted in the need for amputations, the iron gag, which was an iron collar strapped into the mouth and would tear the tongue if the person moved, and the hole, which was an underground cell with no food, light, or air. It's perhaps no surprise then that there were countless murders, suicides, and unexplained deaths at the prison. There have been stories of paranormal instances since the 1940s. Cell Block 12, for example, is known for voices and cackling. Cell Block 6 has unexplained fast-moving shadows. And Cell Block 4 is known for the appearance of ghostly faces. It's now host to a paranormal experience every Halloween. Would you be brave enough to stay the night there? I know I wouldn't.
Watch our scary playlist for more top 15 videos about the most scary subjects. Sit back, relax, and binge watch all of our best videos.